Hello, I'm Kathy Cobb, and today we're going to be doing Revelation chapter 13. We'll be getting in the book of Daniel a lot as well because we're going to make a tie-in to the beast. We're going to be talking about the beast today, and Daniel has a lot to say about this particular beast. So if you haven't started back, though, in Revelation chapter 1, I would encourage you to stay in order. It's really hard to try to pick up in the middle of something and really understand what we've been talking about because there's a lot of lessons that you haven't heard, and it just may not all fit together. So we're going to start with Revelation 13:1. And the dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. He had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on his horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. Now this is the same description that we got of Satan back in chapter 12. He had the 7 heads, the 10 horns, so we can see the beast's connection to him. And as we keep reading, you'll see some more connection. Verse 2. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was astonished and followed the beast. Men worshipped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshipped the beast and asked, "Who is like the beast? Who can make war against him?" Okay, so you notice here how it's saying that when men worship this beast, it's really like they're worshiping the dragon. Why? Because the dragon has given this beast his authority. I believe he's got his evil spirit dwelling in him. So all this power is actually coming from Satan, even though the beast is going to be doing some of these things, and the false prophet as well. Some of the miraculous things are being done through the false prophet, but the false prophet is saying he's getting his power from the beast. So in a sense, that's why he can be God. It would be just like if the prophets were on the earth, when they did these miraculous things, it was actually God that was doing them, but he was using a person. Well, that's the same thing that basically this false prophet is going to be saying, that he's doing these miracles because he's getting his power from this beast. Okay, so verse 5. The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies and to exercise his authority for 42 months. He opened his mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. He was given power to make war against the saints and to conquer them. And he was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. So we see how far his power is going to go. And why is the world so bent on worshiping this guy? Well, it says he's had this wound that had been healed. Some people think that it's going to actually be a world leader that ends up being assassinated, but after the 3 days, he's resurrected because the evil spirit comes into him, and that's when he's going to start conquering the saints, and he's had a major personality shift, that he's even more evil than he was before. Whatever is going on, whether it's literally that he has this kind of wound that comes to his head, or whether it's talking about a revived empire that had lost its power but it came back into existence, I'm not really sure, but I know whatever it is about this beast, because of that healed wound, most of the earth is going to be fooled by him, and they're going to think that he actually is God. And they're not going to think it's weird that he's reigning and ruling in the temple. But people who know their God will firmly resist, will know the scriptures, will know that this guy looks nothing like what Jesus is supposed to look like. But if people want to be deceived because they don't love the truth and they want to delight in wickedness, then they're going to be these people that are going to be astonished by this guy. They're going to think that nobody can come up against him. Nobody's ever going to be able to conquer this guy because he's God. So for 42 months, he's getting this authority, and that's, again, we're 3.5 years. He's getting authority to even conquer the saints. It's going to look like he's more powerful than our God because God's not allowing him to be destroyed until after 3.5 years. The beast was given the authority from God to be able to do these things. It's part of his test to put on the whole world. It's talked about that this hour was going to be a test. Who's going to remain faithful? Who's not? So again, we don't always understand God's ways, but his ways are always right. And this is what he's chosen to do. He's allowed Satan to have a certain amount of authority at this point to even conquer the saints. So our job will just be to be faithful unto death, just like he told that church in Revelation 2, where Satan was going to put them in prison for 10 days, and some of them would die. He said, be faithful unto death, and you'll get your crown. So that's what our job is during that time. Okay, so the beast is talked about in a bunch of other scriptures, so we're going to take a look at those. We're going to start in Daniel 7:21 through 27. And if you read earlier, even earlier in Daniel, it talks about the different kingdoms that are on the earth during this time. It uses the same description, that one of them was like a lion, another one like a bear, another one was like a leopard. So if you want to look at the earlier verses in chapter 7, it'll tell you a little bit about the other kingdoms that will be on the earth at the same time that he's setting up his fourth kingdom. So he's going to be in collaboration with all these kings, but he's going to be the most powerful. The fourth one is the one that's dominating all the other ones, which he's the leader of the fourth kingdom. So, but we're going to pick up in verse 21 and go through 27, I think. Yeah. I kept looking, and that horn was waging war against the saints and overpowering them until the Ancient of Days came, meaning Jesus, and judgment was passed in favor of the saints of the highest one. And the time arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom. So if we're faithful, we'll get possession of the kingdom. When Jesus comes back, he's going to set up his earthly kingdom. We get possession of it as well. And you're going to see that it's going to keep in harmony with what we learned, that it is going to be an earthly kingdom. As we keep reading the scripture, you'll see what it says. Verse 23, thus he said, the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and would devour the whole earth and tread it down and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them, meaning him. He's the one that rises after the other 10. He's going to be more powerful than these other 10. And he will be different from the previous ones, and he will subdue 3 kings. He will speak out against the Most High and wear down the saints of the highest one, and he will intend to make alterations in times and in law. So notice again, he intends to make alterations to the times and the law. He won't be able to, I don't think, to be successful in doing that. He's probably going to try to change the Jewish law and the times, their holidays and all their calendar and all that, but I think he's got too much resistance. He doesn't have the time in that 3.5 years to actually accomplish that. And it says, and they will be given into his hand for a times, and half a time, meaning that the saints are going to be given into his hands for that 3.5 years. He's going to be able to conquer us. And our job, again, is just to be faithful unto death. Don't give up your faith. Persevere, no matter what the cost. Then verse 26, but the court will sit for judgment, and his dominion will be taken away, annihilated and destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, the dominion, and the greatness of all the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the highest one. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all the dominions will serve and obey him. Okay, so notice that this kingdom that the saints get in Jesus, it's under the whole heavens. So it's definitely speaking of an earthly reign here. We're going to have a 1,000-year reign, and after that, Satan will be let loose for a little bit to try to deceive the nations again. There's going to be this huge army coming up against him, but God's not going to allow war to happen anymore. It's going to be a peaceful time on the earth. He's not going to ever allow war to happen again. So God himself will send down the fire, destroy that army, destroy the earth, and now the new heaven and new earth after the 1,000 years will be what we end up living at, where we're going to live for eternity. Okay, so we also find out more about this man in Daniel 8:22 through 25. It says, the 4 horns that replace the one that was broken off represent 4 kingdoms that will emerge from his nation, but will not have the same power. In the latter part of their reign, when rebels have become completely wicked, a fierce-looking king, a master of intrigue, will arise. It's interesting, that word intrigue, because it reminds me of like false miracles. Remember, he's going to be having this false prophet that's going to be able to do these miracles on his behalf and say that he's getting his power from Satan. I mean, from the beast, who we know is Satan, but he's going to claim he's God. So that prophet is going to be saying, just like what our prophets did, I'm not doing this by my own power. I'm doing it by the power of, well, we normally say God, but he's going to be saying the beast, which the guy is claiming to be God. So they won't be surprised by that. Miracles have been done by the prophets, but this is going to be a false prophet that's going to be doing miracles on behalf of the beast. Okay, so in verse 24, it says that he will become very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause astounding devastation and will succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy those who are mighty, the holy people. He will cause deceit to prosper, and he will consider himself superior. When they feel secure, he will destroy many and take his stand against the prince of princes, yet he will be destroyed, but not by human power, because it's Jesus that's going to destroy him. But look at what it says, that he becomes strong, but not by his own power. Again, he's got Satan's power that's helping him to come and rise up. And he will succeed in whatever he does. Now, that doesn't mean that every single person will be under his control. You know, that would be total success if the whole world ended up taking the mark. But it's a term of generality. It means the majority of the people will be able to be controlled by his power, because they're going to end up thinking he really is God. And he will succeed just about in anything he does. But there will be pockets. We talk in the book of Daniel. We haven't gotten there yet, but it talks about how Jordan, parts of Ammon, which is what modern day Jordan is, that they will not be able to be taken under his control. So there are going to be pockets of resistance. So whatever he does doesn't mean everything. Okay, then he says that he considers himself superior, which this guy's going to be, it tells us he's going to be very arrogant, and he will be able to have a lot of success, but not when he comes up against Jesus. He's going to lose. So that's why it says not by human power. Then we're going to look at Daniel 9:24 through 27. This is what's called the 70 weeks of Daniel, and it would be a whole nother study, but basically what's happened is everything's been completed. All 69 weeks have been completed. It started from the rebuilding of the city in Jerusalem until Jesus died on the cross. That was fulfilling the 69 weeks. So we have had now a pause for the last week. The last week is what we're waiting on for the beast to sign his peace agreement, and then that's going to begin the clock again. So when you hear all this, that's kind of a generalized explanation of this. Verse 24. 77s are decreed for your people and your holy city to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. Know and understand this. From the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the ruler, comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. If you add that up, that's the 69 weeks. It's equal to 483 years, and that's about the time from the time that the order to rebuild Jerusalem after they got out of captivity with Nebuchadnezzar and King Cyrus had ruled that they could go back. It's going to be still a few more years before they start rebuilding the city. So if you add that 483 years to the time that they started rebuilding the city, it took you up to Jesus' death. Okay, so then it goes on to say that 26, after 62 sevens, the anointed one will be put to death and will have nothing. The people of the ruler who will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come like a flood. War will continue until the end of desolations have been decreed. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1 7. That's the last week. Each 7 is worth 7 years. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering, and at the temple he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. Okay, so we learn here that he's going to be signing a peace agreement. But in the middle of it, he's going to stop it. That's when he's going to put an end to sacrifice and offering at the temple. He's going to be setting up the image of him. That's the Abomination of Desolation. So it's at that point that Jerusalem is not a place that people want to be, because it's going to be under control of the evil one. Now we got the two witnesses that are going to be there resisting him and preaching the whole time, and he can't touch them during that 3.5 years, not until those 3.5 years are over, and then he will overcome them and kill them. But as we saw last time, that they are going to be resurrected and go up to heaven, and I think that's when the resurrection happens for all mankind. Okay, so now we're going to look at Daniel 11:21 through 45. This is a long reading, but I'll probably make comments as we go along, so we'll just do it verse by verse, and when I stop and make a comment, then we'll just do it that way. Verse 21, he will be succeeded by a contemptible person who has not been given the honor of royalty. So this guy is called a contemptible person. He's not related to any kind of king in the past. He's not been given the honor of royalty. So he's going to be just a common person that rises up out of the ranks, and people are probably going to wonder where this guy come from. That he was pretty much a nobody until he came on the scene. And then it goes on to say, he will invade the kingdom when its people feel secure, and he will seize it through intrigue. And there's that word again, intrigue. Okay, so when he comes on the scene to take control of Jerusalem, the people are feeling secure. Why? Because they've been in this peace agreement where they thought all the nations were at peace with them. They're getting along with everyone. Well, he's going to break it after the 3.5 years, and things are all of a sudden going to radically change. And part of the reason why he's going to again be able to fool the world is because he seizes it through intrigue, false miracles that, again, this false prophet's going to be doing on his behalf. Verse 22, then an overwhelming army will be swept away before him. Both it and the prince of the covenant will be destroyed. I wonder if this isn't talking about Israel, because a prince of the covenant usually referred to the kings in Israel. If you go back and research it in the Old Testament, when they use that term, prince of the covenant, it referred to one of the kings of Israel. So it makes me think that this is when he's going to overpower one of the Israeli leaders over there as well. He's going to destroy one of the princes of the covenant, but not in a way that I think it's killing him, because look at verse 23. After coming to an agreement with him, he will act deceitfully, and with only a few people he will rise to power. When the richest provinces feel secure, he will invade them and will achieve what neither his father nor his forefathers did. He will distribute plunder, loot, and wealth among his followers. He will plot the overthrow of fortresses, but only for a time. Okay, so I'm not sure that he's actually killing him. It could be that it's backing up and talking about the peace agreement that was made earlier in Daniel 9, when it talks about this in 11:23. It could mean that we're backing up. Sometimes the way that they put it, the order of things, it's hard to follow. So it could be that he was killed. It could be that he is overpowering him and he just forms another agreement. I'm not really sure. Time will tell. But what he is doing when he rises to power, it says in verse 23, he's only rising to power with a few people. Again, showing that he wasn't a very well-known person. He's not a real popular person at this point. But when the richest provinces feel secure, so it's not just going to be Israel that feels secure, it's going to be a lot of places, a lot of nations going to feel secure at this time. He's going to invade them and take away the plunder from some of these people, and I think it's going to be the people that resist him. I don't think he'd be, because look at who he's giving it to in verse 24. He will distribute plunder, loot, and wealth among his followers. So when he goes into a nation, if they'll agree to worship him and to follow him, take his mark, he's going to take care of them. They're going to have a good life because they've got everything they need. All the people that are resisting the Christians or the Israelis that will not follow him, he's going to take away all their possessions. He's going to confiscate their houses, their goods, whatever they've got, and give it to his people. So they're going to think this is great, being, this guy's rewarding us if we'll do this. And a lot of people will sell their soul to him because they want even just the riches. We can see how greediness is a big issue in our world today, that people will do all kinds of horrific things to get wealth. Okay, so verse 25, with a large army he will stir up his strength and courage against the king of the south. Now, I'm not really sure who this king of the south is. Up until this point in Daniel 11, it had referred to the king of Egypt. So I'm not sure if this is the king of Egypt, that it's continuing that from when it had been talking about Egypt earlier in years past. The king of the north, in the whole book of Daniel, up until we get to this guy, it referred to the guy in Syria. That part of the kingdom, when it was divided, when Alexander the Great died, he was the king of Greece. He didn't have any children to take over, and his kingdom was divided into 4 parts. This king of the north would be the one that we would call like the area of Syria. So again, time will tell as to who these players are. We don't really know. We just know it's the king of the north and the king of the south, and time will tell as to who their real identity is. But he's going to war with this king of the south, and he's got a very large and powerful army, but he won't be able to stand. And this is why it says in the last half of 25, but he will not be able to stand because of the plots devised against him. Those who eat from the king's provisions will try to destroy him. His army will be swept away, and many will fall in battle. So he's going to have a traitor in his group. He's going to have this army, and maybe one of the commanders, generals, will end up turning on him. It's people who were in his own group that actually turned and ratted him out and ended up causing his fall with his army. Okay, so verse 27, the 2 kings with their hearts bent on evil will sit at the same table and lie to each other, but to no avail, because an end will still come at the appointed time. The king of the north will return to his own country with great wealth, but his heart will be set against the holy covenant. So he's going to hate anything to do with God the Father, God the Son. He will take action against it and then return to his own country. At the appointed time, in verse 29, he will invade the south again, but this time the outcome will be different from what it was before. Ships of the western coastlands will oppose him, and he will lose heart. So here's opposition again for him. Whether this western coastlands is representing Europe, whether it's representing the U.S., I'm not really sure, but as he's wanting to come against Israel again, as he comes against this king of the south, this time there's going to be western coastlands that are going to come to the king of the south's defense, and so he loses heart. He doesn't end up attacking him again. So what does he do? The end part of 30 says, then he will turn back and vent his fury against the holy covenant. He will return and show favor to those who forsake the holy covenant. So again, he's very angry at people who obey God. So he's so set against people that are followers of God. He's going to actually vent his fury against people like that are trying to serve God. But what's he going to do again to his people? Show favor to those who will forsake the holy covenant, which means there's going to be people that are forsaking their faith at this point again because they're going to be more comfortable. They don't want to have to suffer the way that the Christians are having to suffer, or the Israelites who may not even believe in Jesus yet, but they're still resisting him. He doesn't like either group. And he's going to be showing favor to anybody out of any of those 2 groups that are willing to forsake the Holy Covenant. Then verse 31, his armed forces will rise up to desecrate the temple fortresses and will abolish the daily sacrifice. So there it is again here in chapter 11, the same thing we learned from Daniel chapter 9. He's going to stop the daily sacrifices that were being performed in the temple by the priests. And then he's going to set up the abomination that causes desolation. Listen to the rest of the verse of 31. Then they will set up the abomination that causes desolation. With flattery, he will corrupt those who have violated the covenant. There again, violated the covenant. That can be Old or New Testament. But the people who know their God will firmly resist him. So we have to be very strong in our faith. We have to know God, so we got to be so faithful to him at this time. We have to firmly resist him if we're going to remain faithful. There are some that are not, that are like the churches that he was addressing earlier in Revelation 2 and 3, that they weren't all in. They had strayed, they had fallen away, and they weren't willing to go through difficult times. They were too caught up in the worldly things. Well, those are the kind of people that are going to be able to be changed to go from the one side to the other. They're the ones that are going to be convinced to go and violate the covenant, not the people who are so strong in their faith. Although it does say, we were warned that the wise will instruct many, and some of the wise will even fall for a while. That comes later on in 11. We're not going to actually read the entire thing, but I think I skipped over that part. But if you continue to read the whole 11 through the end of that chapter, from about 21 to the end, you'll see that. Verse 36 says, "The king will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will say unheard of things against the God of gods." So this guy's going to blaspheme God and Jesus really badly. "He will be successful until the time of wrath is completed." So he might be thinking he's never going to be destroyed, but Jesus is going to come back and take out his wrath on him. "For what has been determined must take place." So when prophecy says something, it must take place. God's not going to change it. It's going to happen this way. We can't stop it. It's already been written, and it's going to be fulfilled. Verse 38, "Instead of them, he will honor a god of fortresses, a god unknown to his ancestors. He will honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts." So this god of fortresses makes me wonder if it's not nuclear warfare. It was something that had not been around until our age. So it could be that that's what he's honoring, and that's what he's going up against all these other countries with the threat of nuclear attack if they won't follow him. And he gains these weapons through selling of his goods to be able to get whatever he needs to be able to attack the mightiest fortresses. So his battle, his group will be stronger than the rest of them, than any other country around, and that's why he ends up being the top guy. Okay, so we're going to pick up in verse 40. "At the time of the end, the king of the south will engage him in battle, and the king of the north will storm out against him with chariots and cavalry and a great fleet of ships. He will invade many countries and sweep through them like a flood. He will also invade the beautiful land," and I think that's referring to Israel. "Many countries will fall, but Edom, Moab, and the leaders of Ammon will be delivered from his hand." Now, this is where that's the area of what we would call modern-day Jordan. Edom, Moab, and the leaders of Ammon will be delivered from his hand. Now, are they delivered because God is delivering them, like he's allowing them to be able to not be harmed? Or is there some other reason why they're being delivered? Did they capitulate to him? I don't know, but it again shows that he's going to go through many countries. It's not going to just be Israel. It's going to be many countries he's going to sweep through. It says he sweeps through them like a flood. So he's very powerful. And verse 42, we're going to pick up. It says, "He will extend his power over many countries. Egypt will not escape." Again, is that the king of the south? I don't know. Verse 43, "He will gain control of the treasures of gold and silver and all the riches of Egypt, with the Libyans and Cushites in submission. But reports from the east and the north will alarm him, and he will set out in a great rage to destroy and annihilate many." Okay, so who are these reports coming from the east and the north? Who are these players here? I've wondered, could we go as far east as China? Could we go as far north as Russia? Is Russia and China getting involved in this when they find out what this guy is up to? Is this where they come and resist, and that's why Gog and Magog does not mean Russia, it means Turkey? Again, time will tell. It's so hard to know. I don't think he wants us to really totally understand everything, but there will be a time that we'll be able to understand this, I think, more clearly. Okay, but then it goes on to say, verse 45, he will pitch his royal tents between the seas at the beautiful holy mountain. So he's in Israel by Jerusalem. Yet he will come to his end and no one will help him. So this is where he's going to suffer defeat. When Jesus comes to defeat him, nobody can stop him. Jesus is going to end up casting him and the false prophet into the lake of burning sulfur, and nobody's going to be able to stop him. Jesus is here. He's going to take his wrath out on them and anybody else that's coming up against Israel. He's going to save them by stopping this war that is coming up against them. He's going to also save them by giving them the spirit of mercy and grace again. We talked about that 1,000 years being for the time that he's going to show that great mercy and grace on them, and their time of testing will come after the 1,000 years is over. And we're going to go ahead and read just the rest of Daniel 12, 1 through 4, because this shows how it ends up. So we made it to the end of chapter 31, and I want to talk about this in verses 1 through 4 of 12. You'll see that this is where it's all connecting chapter 11 to 12. At that time, at what time? At the time when this guy is setting up his tent by the beautiful mountain. It says, at that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress such as has not happened from the beginning of the nations until then. But at that time, when the guy is setting up his tent there, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Again, whether they're both a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked at that point, that verse seems to indicate it, but then there's other verses in Revelation that I'm not sure, so time will tell on that as well. Verse 3, those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. Many will go here and there to increase in knowledge. So when he talks about Daniel sealing this up, it's because it's not the right time that people were supposed to understand it. Daniel could not understand it. Even with the angel trying to explain everything, it was just too much. It was overwhelming to him. And it said that it was going to be sealed up, which means that when something's sealed, it really doesn't, there's not really understanding about it. But he tells us of a time when it will be to where people can start understanding it. And it's going to be at close to the time of the end when knowledge is increasing. Well, we can see how much technology has allowed knowledge to increase with the internet and all the things that we've got available at our fingertips. So I think some of this has been revealed more accurately, but maybe there's still some areas where we can't totally understand it. But this just goes to show again that this guy is going to be very powerful. But when Jesus comes, you can't win against Jesus. The saints and Jesus will be able to conquer this guy. When we come back with him, you'll see that in chapter 19, we're coming back riding on the white horses along with him. We're going to the battle of Armageddon, and we'll put it, Jesus is going to put an end to it. But unfortunately, most of the countries will be under his control by the time that Jesus is coming back. Most of the earth has turned and has just given up their faith. Okay, so again, I just want to encourage us to remember that whenever we have these times that are going to be difficult, it's called a test. And we can have everything that we need to be able to pass this test. So it's my hope that as things do get more difficult, that we won't give up our faith, that we will trust that he'll give us the power to resist this guy, that we will be one of those that are firmly resisting. Okay, so we're going to pick up now in 13:8. We read up till 7. It says, all the inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast. So we're back in Revelation. I know we're going back and forth a lot, but we're back in Revelation chapter 13, verse 8. All inhabitants on the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the book of life belonging to the Lamb that was slain from the creation of the world. So that was the plan, to have Jesus die even before the world was created. That just blows my mind. That God knew that men were going to sin, that he was going to have to send his son in order to have a relationship with us. And so even before he created us, he knew he was going to have to sacrifice his one and only son, and he still chose to create us. That's how much he desires to have a relationship with us. He would be willing to give up his one and only son for a people who hated him, that spit on him, that cursed him. And that just shows his great capacity to love and forgive and want relationship with us. And shouldn't we want relationship with such a loving God like that? I mean, to get so busy in life where we can't find time to have this connection to God our Father, who loved us that much, that even knew before he created the world that he was going to have to sacrifice his son to redeem us, and he was still willing to create us. Again, that just blows my mind. Okay, then in verse 9 of Revelation 13, he who has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to go into captivity he will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword he will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of the saints. So God's got a plan. We don't know if we're going to be in the group of people that are going to be supernaturally protected for the 3.5 years. We don't know if we're one of the ones that he's saying, if we're to go into captivity, you'll go. You'll go into prison. If anyone's going to be killed with the sword, just be ready. Be okay with that. With the sword, you'll be killed. He's got a plan for each one of our lives, and whichever way he chooses to unfold the plan for our life, and whatever that plan is, we should always be willing to say, not my will, but yours be done, just like Jesus did. But what does he say that we need? Calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of the saints. So again, just persevere. Be knowing that this is going to come to an end. If you pass your test, that's wonderful. You know, it's actually going to say in the book of Revelation that those that end up being killed during this tribulation are more blessed than those that are going to have to remain, because it's going to be so horrible on the earth. Okay, verse 11 of chapter 13. Then I saw another beast coming out of the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb, but he spoke like a dragon. Now this is the false prophet. He's going to be the religious leader. The first guy that comes out of the sea, that's the Antichrist, he's the political leader. This is the religious leader. This is the false prophet. He's going to appear to be like a lamb, which again makes me think of Jesus, you know, that maybe this is the guy that's going to act like he's Jesus. The other guy was God the Father, the beast. I don't know. But here it says that he's taking on the appearance of seeming like he's a lamb, but he's really speaking like a dragon, which means if you pay attention, just because somebody claims to be something, look at their fruit. He's going to speak like a dragon. His message is not going to line up with him being a true prophet of God. Verse 12, he exercised all the authority of the first beast on his behalf and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. So his job is to make sure that everybody that's around Jerusalem and that area are worshiping this false image that's going to be set up. And then look at what else he's going to do in verse 13. And he performed great and miraculous signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to earth in full view of men. Because of the signs he was given power to do on behalf of the first beast, he deceived the inhabitants of the earth. So most people are going to put more of their faith in the miracles than this guy is going to be able to do than his character. And what's one of the miracles he's doing? Causing fire to fall down from heaven. It makes me wonder if, again, that's what the 2 prophets are able to do, is call down fire from heaven to destroy anybody that's coming up against them during that 3.5 years. And maybe he's trying to mimic this. Remember how when Moses did some of the real miracles with turning the water into blood and the rod into snake, how even sorcerers were able to do those things? Makes me wonder if this isn't what he's trying to prove, that he is one of the prophets by doing some of the same things that the two prophets will be doing. And then it says in verse 15, I don't think I finished 14. Let's read 14 again. Because of the signs he was given power to do on behalf of the first beast, he deceived the inhabitants of the earth. He ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. So there's the abomination of desolation. Verse 15. He was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast so that it could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. Well, we can see how this can come true today, but what was John thinking when an image starts speaking? We can see that AIs are able to speak. That's an image of something. They can make the AI look like anybody, anything. I think of even Disney World when I was a kid. I remember going to see the wax statues and everything and how lifelike they looked, and they could make a voice come out from them by having a tape playing. I tend to think it's going to be either like an AI or a hologram of the beast. He's not actually going to be sitting in there the whole 3.5 years. He's going to be off making war against the other nations. So this is just an image that's being set up of him, but it can speak. And anybody that won't bow down and worship this beast and this image is going to be killed. And that's why, again, it calls for faithfulness on the part of the saints. Okay, verse 16. He also forced everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead. So notice that it's got the word he forced everyone. I don't think it literally means that he's dragging you and you don't have a choice, and that he's putting this mark on you, on either your hand or your forehead, because then it would mean that if we're asleep and he ends up getting us, then all of a sudden we lose our salvation because we didn't know what was happening. I don't think it's meaning forced in that word, in that way. I think what it means is that people will feel like they've been forced to take it. I've heard a lot of people say, well, I can't teach about Jesus in the workplace because we've been forced not to they made rules. Well, we don't have to obey those rules. It says it's better to obey God rather than man. But people don't want to lose their jobs, so they feel like they're forced into being quiet. Well, I think that's the same concept here. It's not that they're going to be forced to take this mark, but without it, they can't buy or sell. So they're going to feel like, well, I can't feed my family unless I'm able to get this mark, so I better do it to save my family. No, it's better for us to die faithfully than to take this mark, because you can never repent of it, and then eternally you're lost. So they're not really being forced to take it. They just don't want to pay the price. They don't want to be put in prison. They don't want to be killed by the sword or whatever, plundered, whatever is going to happen to the people that are resisting. They don't want to have to go through that kind of suffering. So they're going to feel forced to take it. Okay, in verse 17, let me back up to 16 so we keep it in order again. He also forced everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead, so that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. This calls for wisdom. If anyone has insight, let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is man's number. His number is 666. Okay, so this number is 666 in our Bibles, but some Bibles, if you see, you might have a footnote. And some translations actually put it as 616. So it's kind of interesting the way that there isn't any definite consensus in some of the old manuscripts and some of the different ones that they found. So when I heard this teaching, and I'm just going to throw it out there, whether it's right or not, I'm just going to share it, because as I've studied, there's things that you start coming across as to what people are thinking about this. There is a man that his name is Walid Shuibat. He's a former Muslim that has been converted to Christianity. He's in our country now, speaking sometimes at different churches. And he was a follower of the Muslim faith. In fact, he almost set off a bomb in Bethlehem when he was a terrorist, but it didn't go off the way that it should have. But he also had married a Christian woman that challenged him to look at his Quran as compared to the Bible. And so when he did the challenge, he was thinking, I'll prove to my wife that she's wrong. Well, as he started reading and he got to the book of Daniel, he started going, oh my goodness, your beast is my Mahdi, which the Mahdi means is like the Christ almost. That's, they look at him as being the Messiah that was to come. And so he's realizing that he's the one that's going to be serving on the wrong side. He'll be serving the Antichrist instead of God, the Father, the real God, the Father. So he started being convinced that, uh-oh, I'm on the wrong side. I got to give up my Muslim faith. And he became a Christian. Well, when he read this part in the book of Revelation, he reads in Arabic as well. He claims that the way that it's written in the Greek is not accurate for translating as 666, and that's why some of the translations put 616, because the translators didn't really know what to make out of it. But he said that when he saw this figure and the way it was written in the Arabic language, it means in the name of Allah. So I don't know whether that's accurate or not. I don't read Arabic. I don't know if that really is literally what he's seeing here, but he tends to think that the beast is going to be from Turkey as well, and that he is going to be Muslim, and the mark that you're going to have to take has something to do with in the name of Allah. So time will tell, and we'll just have to wait and see. So we're going to end there today. This was a little bit longer because we went through a lot of stuff in Daniel, so we're only taking one chapter today. But I hope that you will have a blessed day. Bye.